Have you ever wondered what really brings down the mightiest empires? It's not always invading armies or epic battles. Often, the fatal blow comes from within, from an enemy you can't see, but one that is just as deadly: debt. Welcome back to our channel, where today we're unraveling the dangerous dance between debt, power, and the fall of history's greatest empires. From the opulent courts of the Ottoman sultans to the sprawling territories of other historical giants, a common thread of financial strain weaves through their dramatic collapses. It's a story that repeats itself with eerie consistency. An empire rises, expands its military might, builds magnificent cities, and then it starts borrowing, and borrowing, and borrowing, until the very foundation of its power cracks under the weight of its own financial promises. Let's dive into the core of the issue. How does a nation's balance sheet become its Achilles heel? It often begins with what historians call military overreach. Think about it. Maintaining a vast army, conquering new lands, and controlling distant territories is incredibly expensive. To fund these ambitions, empires often resort to heavy taxation and, crucially, borrowing money from both domestic and foreign lenders. This isn't just a modern phenomenon, it's a tale as old as time. Initially, this strategy seems to work. The influx of cash fuels military campaigns and funds impressive infrastructure projects. The empire looks stronger than ever. But beneath the surface, a dangerous dependency is forming. The economy becomes reliant on a constant flow of credit, and the national debt begins to spiral. This creates a precarious situation where any disruption, a lost war, a trade disruption, or a domestic crisis, can send the entire financial system into a nosedive. A prime example is the Ottoman Empire. In the 19th century, the sick man of Europe embarked on a series of ambitious modernization projects, known as the Tanzimat reforms. They built railways, telegraph lines, and a modern army, all in an attempt to keep pace with the industrial powers of Western Europe. But where did the money come from? Largely from foreign loans, primarily from British and French banks. This created a vicious cycle. To pay the interest on existing loans, the Ottomans had to take out new, even larger ones. Their economic sovereignty was slowly being chipped away. Foreign creditors began to exert immense influence over the empire's policies, eventually leading to the establishment of the Ottoman Public Debt Administration in 1881. This was an organization controlled by European powers that took over the collection of key Ottoman tax revenues to ensure the debt was repaid. Essentially, the empire had lost control of its own finances. Its leaders were no longer the masters of their own house. This wasn't just an Ottoman problem. Many empires have walked this tightrope. The cycle is predictable. Unsound economic policies, often driven by the need to fund military expansion or lavish court life, lead to a ballooning national debt. This is frequently compounded by poor leadership. When rulers are ineffective or more interested in personal gain than national stability, the financial situation deteriorates rapidly. Corruption is another key ingredient in this toxic stew. When officials are skimming off the top, tax revenues don't reach the state treasury, and public funds are mismanaged. This erodes public trust and makes it even harder for the government to manage its finances effectively. The public, burdened by high taxes and seeing little in return, grows restless. This can easily boil over into internal strife and civil unrest, further weakening the empire from within. Think of it like a domino effect. Military overspending leads to heavy borrowing. The debt burden forces the government to raise taxes and cut essential services. High taxes paralyze economic activity, making it even harder to generate revenue. Corruption siphons away what little money is left. The population becomes angry and disenfranchised. Political instability ensues, making it impossible to implement the tough but necessary reforms to get the financial house in order. It's a downward spiral that becomes almost impossible to escape. Another critical factor is the emergence of significant trade deficits. When an empire consistently imports more than it exports, its wealth flows outwards. This erodes its economic power and stability over the long term. If you're constantly buying from others and not selling enough of your own goods, you're essentially bleeding money. Couple this with a mountain of debt, and you have a recipe for disaster. The dependency on foreign loans is particularly insidious. While it can provide a short-term boost, it creates long-term vulnerability. The lending nations can use this debt as leverage, dictating policy and interfering in the borrowing nation's internal affairs. The empire, once a dominant power, becomes a pawn in a larger geopolitical game. Its ability to act independently is severely compromised. History shows us that debt can be a double-edged sword. When managed wisely, it can be a powerful tool to catalyze growth, fund innovation, and build a prosperous society. It allows for investments that pay dividends for generations. However, when mismanaged, it becomes a destructive force that can unravel the very fabric of a nation. The interplay of debt and power has shaped political dynamics for centuries. Emperors and kings have always used debt strategically, attempting to balance the immediate benefits of growth and military power against the long-term risks to their sovereignty. But history is littered with examples of those who got the balance wrong. They leveraged their nation's future for short-term glory, only to find that the bill always comes due. These historical debt crises highlight a cyclical pattern of borrowing, booming, and busting. An empire borrows to expand, enjoys a period of apparent strength, but then finds itself trapped by the interest payments and the conditions attached to the loans. This often leads to a financial crisis, which in turn triggers political instability, social upheaval, and ultimately decline and collapse. So, when we look back at the ruins of once great empires, we should remember that their fall was not always the result of a single dramatic event. More often, it was a slow, creeping decay driven by financial mismanagement and an unsustainable mountain of debt. It's a powerful lesson from history. No matter how mighty an empire may seem, its power is only as strong as its financial foundation. The moment credit becomes a crutch instead of a tool, the countdown to collapse has already begun. It's a warning that echoes through the ages, reminding us that economic responsibility is the bedrock of lasting power and stability. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history. What do you think is the most important factor in an empire's financial collapse? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. See you next time.